You ever witness something in real life that feels too wild to be true? Like the kind of moment that makes your jaw drop because, if anyone ever told you about it, you'd think they were exaggerating? That's exactly what happened in today's story. So listen close, because this one will flip your perspective upside down. Picture this. A woman walks into a fast food joint on a regular Wednesday afternoon. Nothing unusual about that, right? The line's a little long, the fries smell amazing, and there's a young guy working behind the counter. Polite, calm, doing his best. But then something happens that makes the entire place go silent. This woman, dressed sharp, looking like she just stepped out of a corporate meeting, starts insulting the worker. Loudly. Publicly. In a way that makes everyone stop and stare. You can feel the energy shift, like someone just turned the temperature down in the room. But here's the part that no one in that restaurant saw coming, especially her. Because the man she thought was just a fast food worker? He's not only more than what he seems, he owns the entire franchise. Now pause right there, because I know what you're thinking. No way that's real. But stick with me, because not only is it real, the way it all unfolded, it's the kind of twist that hits deep. And trust me, you'll want to stay through to the end, because the lesson behind what happened might just change the way you see people forever. Hey, I know you have a million other videos you could be watching right now, maybe some drama tea, maybe a few TikTok fails, or even a feel-good makeover. But what if I told you, the story you're about to hear isn't just entertaining, it's eye-opening. It's the kind of tale that makes you reflect. The kind that makes you wonder, how often do I misjudge people based on surface-level stuff? Because let's be honest, we've all done it at some point. And if you've ever been on the receiving end of that judgment, this one's going to hit close to home. Now, before we go any further, I want to let you in on something. By the end of this video, you're going to get the answer to the question that brought you here. What happened when the woman found out the man she insulted actually owned the place? You're going to see the full story, from beginning to end, without any fluff or filler. So if you're here for that big aha moment, I promise you, it's coming. But what happens in the middle? That's where things really get interesting. Because there's a reason why this man chose to stay silent at first. There's a reason why he didn't immediately put her in her place. And the way it all unravels? It's a masterclass in character, patience, and something we all forget in the rush of daily life: humility. Let me ask you something real quick. Have you ever had a moment where you were underestimated? Where someone looked at you, based on your clothes, your job, your accent, your skin tone, and decided who you were before they even heard you speak? If so, then you already have something in common with our main character. And that's why this story isn't just about fast food, or rude customers, or surprise endings. It's about human nature. It's about what we assume about each other. And it's about what happens when someone flips the script. Let's talk about the man at the center of the story. His name's Jordan. Quiet guy, early 30s, works the register, helps prep in the kitchen, even mops the floors if someone calls out sick. At first glance, you'd probably think he's just another overworked employee trying to make ends meet. But what most people don't know, Jordan built this restaurant from the ground up. After serving in the military and saving every dime, he invested in his first fast food franchise. Didn't even put his name on the storefront. You wouldn't know he owns it unless you read the fine print. Why? Because he believes in working with his team, not above them. He shows up every day, apron and all, because he remembers what it felt like to be broke, ignored, and underestimated. And then there's the woman. Let's call her Kelsey. Now, Kelsey's not evil. She's not some cartoon villain. In fact, in another life, you might even relate to her. She's stressed out. She's got deadlines. She's on a tight schedule, and she just wants her coffee and breakfast sandwich, now. But what starts as impatience quickly turns into something uglier. The way she talks to Jordan, the way she looks at him like he's beneath her, the names she calls him. It's one of those moments where people freeze, not knowing whether to step in or stay out of it. And Jordan? He stays calm. He takes it all in. And then he says something that changes the entire energy of the room. But I'll get to that part in just a moment. Right now, I want you to ask yourself, who do you become when you're under pressure? When you're hungry, tired, and the line's not moving fast enough? Do you snap? Do you blame the nearest person in a uniform? Or do you take a breath And remember they're human too? Because what happens next in this story is more than just a plot twist. It's a mirror. And sometimes the hardest thing to face is our own reflection. See, what makes this story stick isn't just the twist. It's how real it feels. We've all been in a fast food restaurant. We've all had a long day and taken it out on the wrong person. But how often do we get the chance to see what's really going on behind someone's smile? Behind their silence? What if the person you're yelling at is more successful than you'll ever know? What if the person bagging your fries owns the building you're standing in? And here's where I hit you with the master move, because I know the exact moment you're going to want to skip ahead to the confrontation. But don't. Seriously. Because what happens before that moment is the reason it matters. It's the little things, the way Jordan treats his team, the way he talks to customers, the way he carries himself even while being insulted, that shows you who he really is. And it makes what he says to Kelsey later that much more powerful. So stay with me. Because this isn't just a story about instant karma. It's about dignity, about self-control, about how power doesn't always look like what we think. Sometimes, it wears a name tag and makes minimum wage look effortless. And sometimes, the most powerful person in the room is the quiet one no one's paying attention to. And if you've ever felt small, if you've ever been treated like you don't matter, this story will make you feel seen. But just when you think you've got it all figured out, when you're ready for Jordan to clap back or reveal his status in front of everyone, something happens that nobody expected. Not his employees. Not the customers. Not even Kelsey herself. What he does in that moment, it turns everything on its head. Because sometimes, the best revenge is grace. And just when you think the story is winding down, that's when it takes one final, jaw-dropping turn that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about character, humility, and the power of keeping your cool when the world's trying to push you over the edge. So don't go anywhere. Because in the next part of this video, you're going to see exactly what happened when Kelsey found out who Jordan really is, and more importantly, how he chose to respond. You're going to witness a moment that went viral for a reason. A real-life masterclass in leadership, in dignity, in what it really means to rise above. You came here for a reason. You wanted to see what happened when someone crossed the line, and what came next. That moment? It's coming. But first, we're about to peel back the layers of what really led to that encounter. The backstory that makes the twist even sweeter. And trust me, you don't want to miss it. So sit tight, grab a snack, because what happens next, it's going to stay with you long after the video ends. What most people didn't see, and what made this moment hit even harder, was everything that had led up to it. See, Jordan wasn't just having a normal day. This wasn't some random Tuesday where life was going perfectly and someone's bad attitude just rolled off his back. No, Jordan had already been pushed to his limit that week. Between covering extra shifts because 2 employees had quit unexpectedly and dealing with a burst pipe in the back kitchen that nearly shut the place down, he'd barely gotten 3 hours of sleep in the past couple nights. He hadn't seen his sister in weeks, hadn't had time to call his mom back even though she left him 3 voicemails, and hadn't had a single moment to himself in what felt like forever. And yet, every morning, he still showed up before the sun even rose, putting on that same black cap, tucking in his shirt, and greeting his team with a calm energy that made everything feel like it would be okay, even when things were a mess behind the scenes. Most of the employees didn't know the full story. They just saw a manager who worked harder than anyone else. But behind that calm front was a guy who had clawed his way up from sleeping in his car to owning not 1, but 3 fast food franchises. He'd been through eviction notices, overdue bills, jobs that didn't pay enough to cover gas, and people who promised to support him but bailed the moment things got tough. The thing was, Jordan had always carried his success quietly. No flashy car, no big gold watch, no online "I made it" speech. Just hustle, heart, and the belief that treating people with kindness, especially when they least deserve it, is the real flex. And maybe that's what made Kelsey's behavior sting more than it should have. Not because of what she said, but because Jordan had been her before. Stressed, overwhelmed, on the edge. And he knew what it looked like when someone let their worst self take the wheel. But still, something about this encounter felt different. The way Kelsey snapped so quickly. The intensity in her tone. The way she demanded to speak to someone in charge, like she already knew the script. It wasn't just a bad day. It felt rehearsed. Like she had a chip on her shoulder the size of the drive-thru menu and needed someone, anyone, to take the hit. And as Jordan stood there, listening, absorbing, and letting her words bounce off him without firing back, a part of him began to wonder, who exactly was this woman? Because she didn't seem like a random walk-in. Not exactly. The briefcase. The designer heels. The fact that she knew the name of the regional manager without even glancing at the plaque on the wall. Most people don't walk into a fast food joint with that kind of information locked and loaded. Something about her was off. And that's when the layers started to unravel. Just 2 days before that moment, Jordan had received an anonymous email. Nothing threatening, at least not overtly. But it was strange. It came through the franchise's general inbox with a subject line that read, "You should be careful who you hire." The body of the message had no signature, no company name, just a blurry screenshot of an employee roster with Jordan's name highlighted. At the time, he brushed it off. Probably some disgruntled customer upset that their order was wrong. It happens more often than you'd think. But now, with Kelsey standing in front of him, almost baiting him into reacting, Jordan couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just a coincidence. And it didn't help that things at the store had been off all week. First, one of the new fryers glitched during the lunch rush, nearly causing a small grease fire. Then the register system randomly rebooted in the middle of a transaction, wiping out hours of sales data. Just yesterday, a food delivery came in with half the stock missing, even though Jordan had personally placed the order. Every little error seemed like just that, a random error. But now, it was starting to feel like something or someone was behind it all. Someone who had been watching, testing, waiting for a crack to form in Jordan's calm exterior. The staff had noticed it too in small ways. His assistant manager, Terrence, even joked that the place was cursed this week. But Jordan didn't believe in curses. He believed in patterns. And the pattern that was forming now, it felt intentional, which made Kelsey more than just a rude customer. She might have been the key to figuring out what was really going on. It didn't help that there was tension brewing among the staff too. One of the newer hires, Ray, had started acting weird. Showing up late, talking behind people's backs, asking questions about store finances that didn't make sense for a cashier to be concerned with. And just yesterday, someone had left a note in the break room that read, "Respect is earned, not handed out with a paycheck." No one admitted to writing it, but the handwriting looked suspiciously similar to Ray's application. Still, Jordan didn't want to accuse anyone without proof. He believed in giving people the benefit of the doubt. But now, doubt was creeping in hard and fast. And as all these pieces started stacking up, Kelsey's arrival felt less and less like a random act of rudeness. The way she zeroed in on Jordan. The way she challenged him when he tried to de-escalate the situation. She wasn't just rude. She was probing, looking for a reaction. Almost as if she wanted witnesses. Which raised the biggest question yet. Was this just a bad customer, or something deeper? There's a concept that's been trending in a lot of social commentary videos lately: corporate sabotage, social engineering, exposing undercover bosses. And maybe that's what makes this moment so compelling. Because as viewers, we start to wonder, is Jordan being tested? Is Kelsey part of a bigger plan to push him out? Is someone trying to force a mistake that could get him fired? Or worse, lose the business he built from nothing? These aren't just wild ideas. Because Jordan had been warned before. Not long ago, a competing franchise owner, someone with a long history of trying to buy Jordan out, made a not-so-subtle threat at a community networking event. "It's only a matter of time before a little bad PR takes down a guy like you," he'd said with a smile. Jordan laughed it off at the time. But now? Now it didn't feel so funny. So as Kelsey continued her rant, accusing Jordan of incompetence, threatening to file formal complaints, even snapping a photo of him for evidence, Jordan stood still. Calm. Focused. Because what was happening here wasn't just about one customer's outburst. It was about something bigger. Something that had been building for weeks, maybe months. And whether or not Kelsey knew it, she might have just given Jordan the clue he needed to finally connect the dots. But he couldn't act yet. Not until he was sure. And so, with half the restaurant watching and his team frozen behind him, Jordan did the one thing no one expected. He apologized. Softly. Sincerely. Not because he was wrong, but because he knew it would buy him time. Time to think. Time to plan. Time to figure out what was really going on and who, exactly, was pulling the strings behind the scenes. What happened next would shake the entire restaurant to its core and reveal a truth no one saw coming. But we're not there yet. Not quite. Because just as Jordan turned to check the receipt on Kelsey's order, something, or rather someone, walked through the front door that made his heart stop cold. And in that moment, Jordan realized this wasn't just about protecting his business anymore. It was about surviving something much, much bigger. The sound of the front door chiming barely registered at first, drowned out by the tension humming in Jordan's ears. But as he turned, almost on instinct, his eyes locked onto a figure he hadn't seen in months, his cousin, Deja. She wasn't just family, she was practically a sister, the kind of person who used to have his back when no one else did. But the last time they spoke, things hadn't ended well. There had been a fallout about money, trust, and something deeper Jordan hadn't dared to confront. Yet here she was now, walking in slowly, scanning the restaurant with that unmistakable look of someone who wasn't here just to grab lunch. Her face was tight, jaw clenched like she'd been holding back words the entire drive over. She spotted Jordan, and for a split second, something flickered behind her eyes. Panic, maybe regret, but just as quickly, it was gone, replaced by a calm she wore like armor. Jordan stepped toward her, his voice low. "Didn't expect to see you here," he said, trying to keep things neutral. But Deja didn't waste time with small talk. She held out her phone, unlocking the screen with a quick flick of her thumb, and showed him an email. The same exact subject line he'd seen: "You should be careful who you hire." But this one came with an attachment, an audio clip. Jordan's stomach turned as he hit play. A distorted voice whispered something garbled, then cleared up just enough to say, "They trust you too much. That's their mistake." Then static. Then silence. Jordan's mind raced. Why would Deja get that message? She wasn't on payroll. She didn't work at the restaurant anymore, not since last summer when she stepped away to start her own gig consulting for small businesses. And yeah, their fallout had been ugly, but even in the worst moments, he never questioned her loyalty. Still, the timing was too perfect to ignore. Someone was either trying to get in his head or pit him against people who used to be close. And if Deja was getting pulled in, it meant this whole thing went beyond just this one store. It meant someone out there was playing a long game. And they were playing it well. Deja noticed the look on his face and pulled him aside, away from the customers and the sharp gaze of Kelsey, who was still lurking near the counter with her arms crossed, eyes narrowed like she was waiting for something else to unravel. "I didn't come here to fight," Deja said quietly. "I came because if someone's threatening you, they're threatening me too. And I think it has something to do with Uncle Trey." Jordan blinked. That name, Uncle Trey, hit like a gut punch. He hadn't heard it in over a year. Trey was the one who helped him get his initial loan when no bank would give him the time of day. A local legend with shady connections, Trey always seemed to be walking that fine line between legitimate business and something a little more off the record. Jordan had cut ties after realizing that half the support Trey offered came with strings wrapped in concrete. But if Trey was somehow involved again, if this threat had roots in old debts or grudges, things were worse than he thought. Deja explained that she'd gotten a call a few nights ago, block number, no caller ID, but the voice had mentioned Jordan by name. Told her to warn him about what's coming. She brushed it off at first, assuming it was one of Trey's old associates, trying to stir the pot. But after the email, she couldn't ignore it anymore. And now, standing in the middle of his restaurant with that voicemail still ringing in both their ears, they had to face the possibility that this wasn't just sabotage. It might be retribution. But for what? Jordan had done everything by the book, especially after cutting ties with Trey. He built his business clean, treated his staff with respect, and kept his name far from anything that even smelled like risk. Yet someone was digging through his past, looking for cracks. And with Deja now tangled in the web, those cracks were starting to show. Worse yet, When Jordan pulled up his own phone and tried to trace the email header again, he realized something chilling. The messages weren't coming from a random server. They were bouncing through masked IPs, routed internationally. This wasn't amateur hour. Whoever was behind it knew what they were doing. And they were close enough to touch both his business and his family. And still, the tension in the air hadn't broken. Kelsey hadn't left. She kept pretending to check her phone, shifting her weight from one heel to the other, glancing around like she was expecting someone to arrive. Jordan couldn't shake the feeling that her presence was no accident. That maybe she wasn't just here to cause a scene but to witness one. Or worse, record one. His mind flashed back to the recent glitches in the system, the Fryer mishap, the missing stock, the complaints that didn't add up. What if someone was building a case against him? What if this whole situation had been orchestrated to make him lose it in public, to push him to snap in front of witnesses, so it could all be used against him? And then, like clockwork, his assistant manager, Terrence, came rushing from the back office with a look on his face Jordan had never seen before, part disbelief, part fear. In his hand was a printed page. Not from the email system. From the security printer. "You need to see this," Terrence muttered. It just popped out from the back room. No one hit print. Jordan took the paper slowly. It was a still image from the store's camera feed, grainy, black and white, but clear enough. It showed someone standing just outside the back entrance of the building from earlier that morning. Hoodie up. Face half turned away. But it was the timestamp that made his blood run cold. 5:12 a.m. Long before anyone was scheduled to arrive. And right behind the figure was the circuit box for the restaurant's power system, cracked open, wires hanging. Someone had been here. Not just watching. Tampering. And now, all the dots started to connect. The glitches. The odd errors. The missing food inventory. The anonymous threats. Kelsey's oddly strategic meltdown. Deja's sudden involvement. And now a mystery intruder caught on camera hours before any of them walked in. Jordan's hands tightened around the paper. Someone wanted him out. Someone wanted this business to crash, to burn, and to do it publicly. But who? And why now? Because just when it felt like the pieces were falling into place, one more thing happened that shattered everything Jordan thought he understood. As he turned back to the counter, ready to confront Kelsey and press her for answers, her phone buzzed. She glanced down quickly, and Jordan caught a flash of her screen. It wasn't a text. It was a video call. From someone labeled, "Boss, do not answer." And just like that, everything shifted again. Because now, Jordan wasn't just dealing with one rude customer or a few bad days. He was staring down something bigger. Something dangerous. And the person orchestrating it all might be closer than he ever imagined. Jordan didn't know what made him do it. Maybe it was instinct, maybe it was just years of reading people, but something about the way Kelsey reacted to that incoming call, how fast she tried to shut it off, how her hands trembled just slightly as she fumbled to kill the screen, told him everything he needed to know. That name, "Boss, do not answer," wasn't just an odd contact label. It was a red flag. And the fear in her eyes when she realized someone had seen it, that was real. For the first time since she stormed into the restaurant, Kelsey didn't look angry or in control. She looked trapped. And that's when it hit Jordan like a freight train. Maybe Kelsey wasn't the villain in this story. Maybe she was the pawn. He didn't say a word. He just watched her, carefully, as Deja and Terrence exchanged confused glances beside him. The tension shifted again, like a tide pulling back before a tsunami. Jordan stepped away from the counter, motioning for Terrence to stall the crowd while he pulled Kelsey aside, away from the registers and cell phone cameras.
She didn't resist.
She followed him silently, her eyes darting toward the exits like she was trying to calculate an escape route. Jordan didn't need to raise his voice. He just asked, "Who's controlling you?" And that's when the dam broke. She didn't confess, so much as collapse. Her voice came out in fragments, panic, regret. Something close to desperation. She admitted that she'd been hired, or more like coerced, by a third-party consulting firm that claimed they were doing a stress test on franchise managers for a corporate review. They told her she'd be paid to simulate a difficult customer experience, push buttons, record reactions, and report back. She signed a non-disclosure and even got a wire transfer in advance. But things didn't feel right from the beginning. The script they gave her was too specific. The names they dropped. The pressure they put on her to get Jordan to slip, to lose control, say something that could be twisted. And the threats started coming in when she hesitated. Personal threats. Information about her own life that no consulting firm should have had access to. They knew where her daughter went to school, what car she drove. They even sent her a picture of her house, taken just hours before she agreed to go through with the job. The pieces started falling in a new, terrifying order. This wasn't about corporate audits or even business competition. It was something more sinister, targeted psychological manipulation, the kind of thing that leaves no paper trail but destroys people from the inside out. Jordan's mind raced. Who would go to these lengths? Who had that kind of money, access, and motive? Then Deja stepped forward, her face pale, holding her phone again. "There's something else," she said, almost reluctantly. "I didn't tell you everything earlier." She scrolled through her call history and pointed to a number she'd blocked a few weeks back, an unlisted, anonymous ID that kept calling her after hours, never leaving voicemails. She had written it off as spam, but she finally answered one night. And the voice on the other end? It wasn't Trey's. It was a woman's.
Calm. Calculated.
She knew Deja's full name, her business, her history with Jordan. And she offered her a deal. Help them document Jordan's management style, and in return, her student loans. All of them would disappear. She thought it was a scam. But when she checked her loan portal the next morning, one of her balances had mysteriously dropped by $5,000. No explanation. No trace. And that's when it clicked. Someone out there wasn't just watching them. They were testing them, offering carrots to see who would bite, threatening when persuasion failed, manipulating people close to Jordan to set him up for a fall. And for what? What could possibly justify this level of obsession, this intricate game of character assassination? Then, in the middle of it all, the oldest employee on Jordan's team, an older man named Carl who had been working the Friars for over 5 years without ever asking for a raise or a day off, walked up quietly and said something that stopped them cold. "It's happening again," Carl whispered. Jordan turned slowly, confusion all over his face. "What do you mean again?" Carl looked at Deja, then at Kelsey, then back at Jordan. "I didn't think you needed to know before. Thought it was a fluke or a different owner, different time. But before this place was yours, there was another guy, Brandon. Young, smart, had ideas just like you. Turned this place around. Made it a real community spot. People loved him. And then one day, it all fell apart. Equipment failures. HR complaints. Health inspectors showed up 3 times in 1 week. Next thing we know, corporate shuts him down. He vanished after that. No one ever heard from him again." A chill spread through the group like a ripple across a still lake. Carl continued. "He told me, right before it all went down, that he felt like he was being hunted. Said someone was watching him, trying to catch him slipping. But no one believed him. Thought he was just burned out." Carl shook his head slowly. "I think someone's targeting certain franchises. Testing owners. Breaking them. And now it's your turn." Everything Jordan thought he knew about what was happening, the sabotage, the mystery emails, the behavioral setups, took on a whole new meaning. This wasn't about a customer complaint gone wrong. This was a pattern, a cycle, a system. And Jordan wasn't the first target. He was just the next one in line. But why him? And more importantly, who would benefit from destroying people like Brandon, like Jordan? Who's pulling the strings? And how much deeper does this go? Because now, the game wasn't just about saving a restaurant. It was about surviving something that was designed to make people like Jordan disappear. The weight of it all settled hard on Jordan's shoulders, heavier than anything he'd carried during the long nights building this business from nothing. He'd dealt with stress before, grinding to make rent, managing supply chain delays, handling customers who lost their tempers over missing sauce packets. But this wasn't that. This wasn't business as usual. This was something darker. And now, as the truth peeled back layer by layer, what he saw underneath wasn't just disturbing, it was dangerous. The pieces were adding up to something sinister, and yet one key part of the puzzle still didn't make sense. Who was behind this, and what exactly did they want from him? He didn't have time to dwell. Not when Terrence walked in again, looking more shaken than before. In his hand was a sealed envelope. No postmark, no name. Just Jordan, handwritten on the front in thick black ink. It had been slipped under the office door, while everyone was distracted. That alone was enough to make Jordan's stomach twist. He ripped it open, and inside was a single sheet of paper. A printed message, no signature, no letterhead. Just 5 chilling words. You have 48 hours.
Decide.
And beneath it, in a smaller font, your reputation or your life's work. He read it twice, then a third time, and his pulse thundered in his ears. What kind of decision was that? What exactly was he being asked to choose? Then Deja stepped closer, reading over his shoulder, her face pale. They want you to walk away, she whispered. Burn it down yourself, or they'll do it for you, and make sure you take the fall. It sounded insane, and yet everything that had happened pointed to that being exactly the game. The system failures, the strange emails, the planted drama, the missing inventory, the security footage of the tampered wiring, the psychological pressure. It was all designed to make him break, to push him to a tipping point where the choice wasn't about success anymore. It was about survival. Jordan sat down hard on one of the metal stools near the register, elbows on his knees, the paper clenched in his fist. His brain spun with questions, but one thought broke through louder than the rest. Someone close to him had to be in on it. There was no way this level of access came from the outside alone. The camera stills, the internal emails, the access to employee files. This wasn't just a hacker. Someone inside had helped. And the thought that it might be someone he trusted made his skin crawl. So, he did something he wasn't sure he was ready for. He confronted Terrence. Not because he was sure, but because Terrence had been acting different lately, distracted, twitchy, overly defensive. The kind of nervous energy that doesn't come from overwork alone. Jordan asked him straight, "Have you given anyone access to the office network? Opened anything suspicious? Forwarded internal emails?" Terrence looked stunned, then offended, then something else. His eyes dropped for a second, and he said nothing. That silence was the loudest sound in the room. Jordan didn't push. Not yet. But that moment between them, it cracked something open. He wanted to believe Terrence was loyal. He'd been working there nearly as long as Carl. But the truth was, Jordan hadn't been paying attention lately. Not really. He'd been so caught up in the day-to-day chaos, he hadn't noticed the little changes. The way Terrence started staying late without being asked. The way he'd brush off IT issues like they were nothing. The way he'd started locking the office door, even when no one else was in the building. Still, accusing him without proof could backfire. It could push the wrong person into desperation. And if Terrence was involved, Jordan risked fracturing one of the only solid relationships he had left. But if he was involved, if he was the one who gave access to whoever was behind this, it meant Jordan had been feeding information to his enemy this entire time. And that's when the next blow came. Deja's phone rang again. This time, she answered. The voice on the other end was crystal clear. Female. Confident. No static. No distortion. You're running out of time, the voice said, calm as a surgeon. Your cousin has 48 hours to sign over his stores to the holding company we'll send. Clean exit. NDA included. If he doesn't everything you've built, Deja goes down with him. Your certifications. Your client accounts. Your licenses. We have access. You've already given us more than you realize. And just like that, the mask came off. This wasn't random. This wasn't some disgruntled ex-employee or a corporate sting. This was targeted, weaponized pressure, and now it wasn't just Jordan's business on the line. It was Deja's entire future. They weren't just trying to dismantle his franchise. They were clearing the board. Jordan grabbed the phone from her hand and spoke into it, his voice low but firm. What do you want? The voice didn't hesitate. Control. Of your region. Your locations. Your brand. You're small enough to fold without a lawsuit, but big enough to be worth acquiring. We've done it before. You've seen what happens to the ones who resist. Then the call ended.
Dead air.
No trace. No number. And now the impossible choices were laid out in front of him like a twisted puzzle. If he signs the stores over, he loses everything he's built, but Deja stays safe. His staff keeps their jobs. His name might disappear, but at least the buildings stay open. If he refuses, the attacks will escalate. People will get hurt. Reputations destroyed. They'll make sure the story spun publicly paints him as the failure, the abuser, the fraud. And in this country, where online backlash hits faster than due process, perception is everything. He could go to the police, but with what? An anonymous voice? A couple of unexplained system failures? The threats were real, but slippery. Intangible. No one would touch it without a smoking gun. And every minute that passed without a move, the noose tightened. He looked around the store, at Carl, quiet and steady, at Terrence, eyes lowered but still unreadable, at Kelsey, now curled up in a corner booth, head in her hands, phone turned off, at Deja, staring at him like she already knew what this might cost them both. The choice wasn't just his anymore, and the clock had already started ticking. Jordan didn't sleep that night. He sat in the restaurant office, lights dimmed, security feeds looping across the screen in a slow flicker, his thoughts spiraling in every direction. The envelope, the call, Kelsey's confession, it all played on repeat in his head like a nightmare that refused to end. He kept waiting for something, anything, to give him clarity. But what came instead was far worse. Just after midnight, the restaurant's alarm system glitched and sent a false trigger. The system automatically pinged his phone, and when he checked the feed, someone had accessed the network remotely. Not just poking around this time. Uploading files. Injecting something deeper into the system. Within seconds, all the security feeds went black. He drove there without thinking, heart racing. When he arrived, the doors were still locked, the parking lot empty. But his gut told him everything was wrong. He stepped inside, and the first thing he noticed was the smell. Burnt plastic. He rushed to the back office, and there it was. The router, fried. Melted wires. Someone had cooked the system to wipe everything. Every camera file. Every timestamp. Every piece of digital evidence he could have used to prove what was happening. It was gone. He felt something twist in his chest. Anger, disbelief, fear, and before he could process it, his phone buzzed again. Another message. No subject line. Just one sentence. That was a warning. You still have time to cooperate. And then, the last straw came. At 2:13 a.m., Carl sent a single text. No explanation. Just a screenshot of an internal employee group chat that Jordan didn't even know existed. It was encrypted through a third-party app, something Terrence had encouraged the team to use for faster communication. But what Jordan saw there chilled him to the bone. A thread of messages between Terrence, Ray, and two other names Jordan didn't recognize, talking about extractions, activation dates, evidence collection, and most damning of all, Phase 3. Strip him clean. Terrence. The one person Jordan had mentored, protected, defended when other managers questioned his work ethic. The one he trusted with keys, access codes, financials. The one who had been there for every decision, every late-night rush, every community event. And all this time, he'd been part of the operation to bring him down. Not just watching, but orchestrating from within. Jordan couldn't breathe for a second. His hands trembled as he gripped the phone, feeling the betrayal burn into his chest like fire. But it wasn't just Terrence. The more Jordan dug, the more connections unraveled. That holding company Kelsey mentioned? It wasn't just trying to buy out his franchise. It was linked to a shadow chain of shell companies that had been scooping up struggling small businesses all across the region. Laundromats, convenience stores, gas stations, and yes, fast food joints. Every one of them once owned by independent operators and now quietly swallowed into a bigger network with no face, no public identity, just layers of fake CEOs and forged digital paperwork. This wasn't about Jordan anymore. This was about systemic erasure. A corporate sweep of small business owners, many of them people of color, single parents, veterans, pushed out through smear tactics, manipulated data, and a web of psychological warfare. The people who fought hardest to build something from nothing were being targeted with surgical precision, removed from their businesses, and replaced by silent buyers who had never set foot in the storefronts they now controlled. And Jordan had been next in line. But now, with the betrayal exposed and the full scale of the operation coming into focus, Jordan knew the pressure wasn't just on him to survive, it was on him to stop it. He called Deja, voice low, steady. Told her to gather every document they had, loan records, email logs, HR files, security paperwork. Every shred of evidence, no matter how small. He called Carl next, asking if he still had that flash drive he mentioned last year, the one he used to back up footage from the old owner, Brandon, the one who disappeared. Carl said he'd hidden it in a safe at home, paranoid even back then that someone might try to erase everything. And then, with the weight of truth behind him and betrayal still burning in his veins, Jordan did the hardest thing yet. He called Terrence.
He didn't yell.
Didn't accuse. He just said he needed to meet.
Alone.
Terrence hesitated, then agreed, but his voice was different now. Flat.
Cold.
Like he'd already decided how this was going to end. And Jordan knew, without question, that this meeting would change everything. Because now it wasn't about saving the store. It was about exposing a system designed to destroy people like him, quietly, efficiently, without ever leaving a fingerprint. And the only way to beat it was to walk straight into the storm. The night was heavy, thick with a kind of humidity that made the air feel suffocating, but Jordan couldn't seem to shake the coldness that had gripped his chest. The meeting with Terrence had been set. He'd agreed to come, but Jordan didn't trust him anymore. He wasn't sure he ever had. But this was it. Everything was on the line. As he sat in his car, parked just outside the dimly lit back alley of the restaurant, Jordan's mind replayed the last few hours. The betrayal. The lies. It was all too much to process, too much to fully comprehend, but there was no time for that now. He'd spent his life building this business, believing in people, believing in the power of hard work and community. And yet, now, everything he had fought for was crumbling in front of him. The world around him seemed to pulse with a rhythm all its own as his phone buzzed in his pocket. It was from Deja, just one word. Get out. Jordan's heart skipped a beat, and for a moment, everything in his body screamed to listen. But there was no backing down now. He had to confront the truth, even if it meant going up against the very people he thought he could trust. He stepped out of the car and moved quickly to the back door of the restaurant, the familiar smell of grease and fries somehow grounding him despite everything that had gone wrong. He checked his watch, 9:15 p.m. Terrence was supposed to be here by now. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours, and as Jordan paced the dark alley, his thoughts kept swirling. The betrayal wasn't just about Terrence anymore. It was about everyone, Deja, Carl, Kelsey, even the employees he'd hired in good faith. The truth was clear now. They were all part of something bigger. Terrence had been the inside man, but there were others. The shadowy figures pulling the strings, using the vulnerabilities of small business owners, building an empire on lies and manipulation. And as much as Jordan wanted to scream in frustration, he knew he couldn't afford to act on impulse. He had to think, strategize. And then, just as he was about to check his phone for any updates from Deja, a car rolled slowly into the alley, headlights cutting through the darkness. Jordan stiffened. It was Terrence's car. But something felt wrong. Terrence didn't step out right away. The door opened slowly, and a tall, thin figure emerged from the driver's side. Not Terrence. A woman. She was dressed in black, her face obscured by the shadow of the street lamp above. Jordan's pulse quickened. He instinctively backed up into the doorway of the restaurant, holding his breath, hoping to stay out of sight. The woman took a few steps forward, her voice low but unmistakable as she spoke into her phone. It's done. He's here. Prepare for Phase 4. Jordan's blood ran cold. Phase 4. What did that mean? Who was she talking to? He couldn't stand there and wait any longer. He had to act. He darted across the alley, moving with a kind of speed he hadn't used in years. He rounded the corner just in time to see the woman walking toward the restaurant door. With no time to lose, Jordan rushed forward, grabbing her by the arm. The woman spun around, eyes flashing with recognition, but there was something eerily calm in her expression. She didn't fight him. "Who are you?" Jordan demanded, his voice low, furious. "What is this? What do you want?" She didn't flinch. Instead, she just smiled, cold, calculated. "You don't know, do you? You've been playing into our hands all along. You thought you were the victim, but you were just a piece of the game. It's not just you. It's never been just you." Before he could respond, she pulled a small device from her pocket. A sleek, black box with a red button on top. "This is how it ends, Jordan. For you, for Deja, for all of it." She pressed the button, and the sound of the store's alarm system blared to life, deafening and chaotic. Jordan felt his stomach drop. They had set him up. This wasn't just an attack on his business. This was about destroying everything, taking away his foundation, and turning it into rubble. Suddenly, there was a loud crash as the back door of the restaurant flew open. Terrence emerged, eyes wide, hands held up in surrender. "Jordan, stop. Don't." But it was too late. The woman smirked and spoke into her phone again. "He's here. Make the call." The tension in the air was suffocating. Jordan's mind raced. He looked between Terrence and the woman, both of them complicit in whatever this was, and then, like a sudden, brutal jolt of clarity, the truth hit him. The woman wasn't working for some outside company. She was his own cousin. It made sense now. The reason why Deja had been so silent, so cautious, when the pressure was on. She was part of it. She was the one who had recruited Terrence, who had set the whole thing in motion. "Deja," Jordan whispered, the betrayal tasting sour on his tongue. "You're behind this?" The woman stepped back and removed her hood, revealing Deja's face. It was her, but not the Deja he knew, the one who had stood by his side through thick and thin, who had helped him with every challenge, every setback.
No.
This was someone colder. A stranger hiding behind a mask of familiarity. "I didn't want to, Jordan," she said quietly. "But you don't understand. You never understood how big this was. They have control of everything now. Your business, your reputation, the whole region. It's all part of a bigger picture. And you're too much of a threat to let stay in a way." Jordan's world fell apart. Every word she spoke shattered everything he had ever known about the woman who had been more like a sister than a cousin. The phone call, the manipulated messages, the false promises. All of it was a lie. It was all a carefully constructed web designed to make him fail. But in that final moment, with the alarms ringing, with Deja standing before him as the mastermind, something inside him snapped. He wasn't just a victim. He had been playing into their hands. But now, he wasn't going to let them win. He turned to Terrence. "You still have a choice," he said, his voice low but filled with newfound resolve. "You can walk away from this. You can still get out." Terrence didn't speak. His eyes flickered between Deja and Jordan, torn, unsure. The woman, the real enemy, smiled at Jordan's attempt at redemption. But before she could say another word, there was a sudden sound, a crash, and a blur of motion as someone barreled through the door. It was Carl. He was holding a flash drive in his hand, blood dripping down his forehead, but his eyes locked on Jordan with a look of determination. He didn't say a word. He just tossed the flash drive to Jordan, who caught it without hesitation. "Everything," Carl whispered, "is on this." As Deja's face twisted in fury, as she stepped forward to stop him, Jordan didn't hesitate. He clicked the drive into his phone. The evidence, everything came pouring in. The truth at last. And with it, their game was over. The days following the confrontation felt like a blur to Jordan, like time itself had bent in the wake of everything that had happened. He had been prepared for this moment. He'd always known there would be a reckoning, but nothing had truly prepared him for the fallout. The legal battle was brutal, and the media storm that followed was like a tidal wave, pulling him under, only to thrust him back up gasping for air. It wasn't just about the business anymore. It was about survival. It was about reclaiming something far more valuable than the restaurants, something that could never be taken away: his integrity. Carl's flash drive had changed everything. With it, The authorities were able to gather the irrefutable evidence needed to expose the conspiracy that had been silently unraveling his life. The holding company, Deja's connections, Terrence's involvement, the entire network of manipulation, they were all brought to light. What followed was a whirlwind of lawsuits, public exposure, and the dismantling of a shadowy operation that had been targeting small business owners like him for years. It wasn't just a win for Jordan. It was a victory for anyone who had ever been caught in the gears of a system designed to swallow them whole. The media ran their stories, the investigations deepened, and while some of the key players were taken into custody, others were still lurking, their faces hidden in the shadows. The final details of the operation, like pieces of a puzzle scattered across a map, remained out of reach, but at least now, Jordan had the power to fight back. Deja was arrested, of course, but the arrest itself felt like nothing more than a formality. She hadn't been just his cousin, she had been a master of the game. The phone calls, the subtle manipulations, the way she'd woven herself into every decision, every thread of Jordan's life, it was all part of her plan to position herself for a much larger role in the world she'd been building. But the weight of betrayal never fully lifted from Jordan's chest. Deja had been his family. And to find out that she had been playing him the entire time, it changed everything about the person he had once believed she was. Even as she was led away in cuffs, her face impassive, he couldn't bring himself to feel satisfied. He'd won, yes, but at what cost? Terrence, too, was brought into the fold of the investigation, but his role was less clear-cut. While his initial involvement in the sabotage was undeniable, it turned out that he had been under his own pressure. Deja had twisted the narrative in such a way that Terrence had felt cornered, manipulated into following her lead under the guise of loyalty and promises of a better future. But there was a small glimmer of hope in his redemption. Terrence cooperated with authorities, offering vital details that helped to solidify the case against the network. He couldn't undo the damage he had caused, but in a way, his actions allowed Jordan to see that perhaps not everyone in his circle was beyond redemption. For the first time in a long while, Jordan could breathe, but there was no joy in the release. He wasn't sure how he'd ever look at Terrence the same way again. The years of trust now gone. The hardest part came with the aftermath. The restaurant was still his, but the feeling that had once filled its walls, the bustling energy, the laughter of customers, the warmth of community, was now absent. It wasn't just the loss of the business that hurt. It was the erosion of trust. For weeks, Jordan walked the halls of the restaurant, unable to shake the feeling that something had been stolen from him in a way he couldn't explain. And yet, as the dust settled, he began to realize something important. Maybe the business wasn't the only thing that needed saving. Maybe it was him. Jordan started to rebuild, but not in the way he had before. He wasn't driven by the same hunger for expansion, the need to conquer every challenge with relentless force. Now, he was focused on a different kind of growth. He worked to restore what had been broken, not just with his business, but with his relationships, with the people who had remained loyal to him through everything. He found solace in simple moments. The smile of a returning customer, the laughter of his team as they joked over a late-night shift, the sense of connection he'd once thought was lost for good. Deja's fate was still uncertain, tied up in the courts and investigations that were dragging on longer than Jordan had hoped. He couldn't erase what had happened between them, but as the trial approached, he realized that holding on to anger wouldn't help him move forward. He would never forgive her, but he didn't have to. For his own peace, he needed to let go. And then, as if the universe had one final card to play, an unexpected call came in. It was from an old friend. Someone who had disappeared from his life years ago, someone who had been just as involved in the business world, but in a way that Jordan had never fully understood. The voice on the other end was familiar, but the message was a stark reminder that the story wasn't over. "I know you've been through a lot," the voice said, "but there's still more you don't know. Someone's still pulling strings. Someone who's been in the shadows this entire time." Jordan's heart skipped a beat, but before he could respond, the line went dead. The message lingered in his mind. There were still people out there, hidden, waiting. The system wasn't broken yet, not completely. The game hadn't ended. And just like that, Jordan found himself standing at the edge once more, staring into the unknown, unsure of what would come next, but more prepared than ever to face it. The door had opened, but the path ahead was still unclear. The conspiracy had been exposed, but the true depth of the operation was only beginning to surface. For every victory Jordan had achieved, there was still a much larger battle waiting to be fought. The camera panned out as Jordan stood alone in front of his restaurant, the night sky stretching above him, full of possibility, yet dark with unanswered questions. The story had reached its conclusion, but in the quiet of that moment, it was clear. The fight was far from over. The screen faded to black.